this screencast, we're going to look at some of the querying options and reporting options that exist here in Union Fusion. And while we could go off onto other grids, I'm going to focus us right here in the members grid. And one of the reasons I'm doing that is this is probably the most commonly used grid for most of our Union locals in the platform. So a couple things I want to bring to your attention, and I've mentioned this in other screencasts, but I'll certainly want to reinforce it here. This grid is used all throughout the system. I mean, we use it for managing people, companies, events, payments, any number of things or pieces of data that exist in the platform. The grid is the same in terms of the way that it behaves. You'll notice that I've got a hover. I can hover and it highlights the one I'm currently hovered over. If I do elect to choose a particular row on the grid, it's going to drill into that record and show me the profile view for the individual I just selected. I'm going to hit the back button up here and go back to the grid itself. Some of the other things here, you'll notice the blue hyperlinks that sit right here between the column headers and the actual data itself. Now, these are what are referred to as inline filters. And these are really nice because they allow you as the user to simply filter the data with very little training. You can actually see the nature of the data in here. If I click on, for example, all classifications here, and I want to see the journeyman, the BT journeyman, I can simply click that option, click the checkbox to confirm, and it will filter down onto just the rows containing BT journeyman in the classification. If I want to remove that and go back to the primary grid, I just open the filter again, hit clear, and I go and again, click the checkbox, and I go back to the entire data set again, where I'm looking at 25 records here in the system. Some other things besides the inline filters, the column headers themselves also act as a sort, and this is also very common in our platform. So notice that when I click on the name header, it sorts the data set alphanumeric in an ascending sort. So here I'm going A to Z. If I click it again, the arrow points down, and here now I'm going Z to A in terms of my alpha sort. This is true about most of the columns in here. And you'll notice it's got this little finger icon that you see when I hover over region. If I click on it, it's going to sort on region there alphabetically. If I click on it again, it's going to sort it in a descending order. It's true with most of the columns here. In fact, you see that as I'm just hovering over these. Okay, you will notice that the inactive status can't be sorted. There are some columns in the system that cannot be sorted because of the nature of the columns themselves. I'm not going to go into why that's the case. Suffice it to say, most columns in most grids can be sorted. Here's another really cool feature that we added in our platform that is unique to our grids. Over here on the right, we've got what looks to be a wrench icon. I've heard people refer to this as a dog bone as well, but this is really intended to be a wrench icon. It's meant as an icon indicating configuration on the grid itself. So let's just say hypothetically that I do not need this membership column, that I don't need this as a differentiator, and I want more space for the existing columns that already exist on the grid. In fact, we can even say hypothetically, I don't need this or this. In fact, I do want to keep this. I'm not going to keep the start date. I'm going to get rid of membership and start date because the only thing that really matters to me is knowing what classification they are and what their paid through date is. So I'm going to remove the start date and the membership. To do that, just click on the icon over here, find the one that you want to remove, uncheck that box here and on start date, and you'll notice they go away. Now, this is a user-specific setting. So while you did this as an individual, don't expect your coworker, when looking at their grid, to reflect what you have on your grid. Again, this is a user-specific setting, and it's specific to this grid. So what you simply did there on this grid is removed a couple of columns that were not important to you in your role or the work that you perform at your local. They may be important to other people, and so this is one of the reasons why we make them user-specific. So there you notice I did a little bit of configuration to remove some columns. And again, I can filter this down if I want. In fact, I'm going to go down to a current job class. I'm going to go to Apprentice 4. Notice that it goes down on the 3 individuals that match. Now, a couple things I want you to pay attention to. We've talked about the filtering. We've talked about the inline filtering and the sorting. So I can even sort this one Z to A if I want. Now I'm sorted in a descending order. One of the things that I want you to keep in mind as you're working with the grid is that whatever content you have in the grid and the order that it's currently in will always be reflected in any of the reports that you choose. Now, when we're looking at reports here as it applies to membership, we've got some built-in reports here at the top, number 10 envelopes, 5160 labels, skills report, and a transaction activity report. These are common ones that we've built in for customers previously. These are some specific reports that we created, particularly in this demonstration model of our platform. We added one that's called the member detail. And by default, all grids always have the default export, which is to say it's going to export exactly the columns that are out here. But the point that I wanted to make to you is this. Whenever you output any of the reports that belong here in the reporting icon, you get in the report output exactly what you're looking at in the grid in exactly the same order. So here I've got 3 rows, and notice they're sorted in a descending sort order by name. Watch what happens when I just choose the envelopes. Okay, I'm running the report, it's rendering. It just dropped it into a PDF down here. When I open it, notice what I get. I get the envelopes exactly the way it's prescribed. And by the way, this information can be changed so that it's specific to your local, or we can just choose not to put that on your envelope format. Both are possibilities there. But you will notice that the information being output comes out in exactly the order I specified. Only 3 records, we see them here, and precisely in the order that existed in the grid. Here's the grid showing Nash, then Davis, then Atwood. Here are the envelopes showing Nash, then Davis, then Atwood. If I close this up and go back to the grid itself, I'm going to output in, we'll choose this member detail report. This is just an Excel-based report, or what's referred to as a tabular report. Because there's only 3 records, it just takes a moment to generate that. It's on this separate monitor, and so I'm going to drag it across here so that you can see it. And you'll notice that when it outputs this information, and by the way, these columns here, A to, in this case, O, are all custom columns that I have selected. In this membership detail report, we built this report in a custom capacity. You can add columns, you can determine the order of the columns. You can even determine the way that the columns themselves are named. I'll talk about that here shortly. But again, the point I want to emphasize is that the order and the number of records is precisely what we see in the grid itself. So here I've got the order coming up and descending based on last name. That's exactly what we had in the grid here. Just as a quick example, if I remove the filter, in fact, I'll just click on members to go back to the original grid. So here I'm looking at 25 records sorted A to Z. If I choose my member detail report, and again, it's opening up in Excel. I'm going to open this up and bring it over to this window so everybody can see it. I get the exact same number of records. This happens to be 25 records. It's on the 26th row, but that's because we've got a header row. And also notice that the order of the content is exactly the way we see it in the grid. Very, very important for all of you to understand that this is the way our grids work. We like to simply say, what you see is what you get. That's a common phrase or expression that when you're looking at your content here and you output it to reports, you'll get exactly the same in exactly the same order. Now, there are some additional things that I want to bring to your attention on this grid that you should be aware of. Sometimes when you're filtering the data, the inline filters that you have here are not nearly sufficient enough to ask the questions that you might be wanting to ask. I'll give you an example of one. Find me all members within the platform that exist in the following 2 zip codes. And then let's just say hypothetically, we'll list off 2 zip codes that are in your area. Now this is a demo database, and so I'm going to use zip codes that are local to me, but exactly the same would apply to you in terms of the way that we would conduct this particular query. And so this shows an advanced technique on filtering or querying the data. Now we said we want to query on zip code. You'll notice that I don't have any columns here that are actually focused on zip code. In fact, I don't even show the zip code. I do show the region here, but I don't show the zip code. However, as we all know, all of these individuals, more likely than not, and your members are certainly going to fall into this category, are going to have physical addresses that represent their home or their domicile. In order to find people in multiple zip codes, you're going to require some sort of advanced filter or query. In order to do that from here, because the inline filters are not sufficient, you simply need to click on the binoculars. This binoculars, when you click on it, will open up what's called a query by form. Now, this query by form provides a number of the fields that we already see in the inline filters, so it's somewhat redundant here. But one of the key features that it provides that you don't have access to in the inline filters is the advanced filter. In the advanced filter, the sky is the limit. And we mean that sincerely. It doesn't matter how you want to filter this data. If you have a very complex filter that you need to apply to a data set, this is the route that you need to take in order to generate the data. And I'm going to just show you real quickly how we would set one up to ask it across multiple zip codes in this area. The way I would do it here is I need to find the default address and then ultimately the zip code field. Then I'll choose the appropriate operator and the comparison values to drive the query. But watch how this works. So because I'm on the member record, one of the things that I actually need to back up to in our system is referred to as the entity. Now, the entity within our platform really refers to a combination of either people and or companies. It represents both. In our member table, all members are people, and so ultimately all members are entity. And so we always start here. Once I've gone into entity, I would then go into the person. I'll go down to the person and then I'll drill in here. And now for the individual that represents the people in my membership grid, I'm going to request the default address. That's the one on top here. And I'm going to drill in there. And then I'm going to go down right to zip code. So this was a little bit of a long route to get to this point of finding the zip code. But using our platform long enough, you'll discover how this information is managed and how it's directly related to a member so that you can filter or query your data on zip code as well. Now, in this particular example, I actually want to put in more than one value. I don't want to just say the zip code equals some value. In order to do that in what's referred to as SQL, we use an operator called the in operator. This is a very powerful operator that allows me to put in a comma delimited list of values where the system will find all zip codes where the values are in any of the values offered up here. And so some of our local zip codes here, 22701, 20111, 411. I'm going to go ahead and search for those three just to show the example of how it works in our platform to find on multiple zip codes. When I hit search, the system only found a single record that matches. I think it's probably 22701, just knowing this test data. I'm going to control click this just to check it. Yep. In fact, you're seeing here that this is part of Culpeper County, VA, and you can see the zip code is 22701. Now, I can modify this member query by actually providing other other zip codes that are in the system and that belong to members, but I need to know what those zip codes are. So let's just poke around and find zip codes from a couple of other members. Okay, so here's one, 22150. I'm going to write this down and then we'll use this in finding these people. 22150. And then I'm going to go find another, at least one more or possibly two more random zip codes. I'm going to open up the records for this individual. That's another 22701. Here's one, 17233. -87. let's see, dash 8760. And then I'm going to come back here. I'll get one more here. So here we've got 20782. So I've got a few that I can work with in order to bring some data back. Let's go back to the members grid. And again, we're going to do the advanced query here. So I will go into now there's a few that have already been added. I'm going to clear that membership here. And I'm going to go ahead and do the advanced filter again. And then I'm going to bring up that zip code. I got to get back to that same place where I've selected the zip code field. I got to go to entity, then person. Then I bring up the person's default address. And then zip code. And then again, we're going to choose the in operator. And this time I'm going to use 22701 in addition to 22150, in addition to 20782. Now I expect to find at least 3 records, maybe more. Okay, and I found 2. And there's always reasons for why this is the case. It could be that the zip codes belonging to that third individual were not actually just 5-digit zip codes, but they were the full 9 digits. And when you're searching for those, you actually need to be specific in order to get that. You can also use a contains in. So let me go back and show that so that it's a little bit more powerful. If I were to use contains 22150 and hit search, you'll notice that it does actually pull up an individual with that match. And so here's this one person that has a zip code that's 22150. They've also got this additional 4 digits here, but you're noticing that because we use the contains, it just was looking for a partial value in there when it was returning the record. I'm going to go back again, looking at my membership. I'm going to jump back in, and I'm going to apply that filter one more time, just using 22701 and 20782. I think we got a couple of hits here. Nope. I got a problem with my data. It's because I've got the contains and I need to be using the ends. There we go. And so both records are returned. In any case, here you're looking at an advanced query in the data. One of the really nice things about this is I can actually save this query now, give it a name, search members on multiple zip codes. Now watch how useful this is. I'm going to save the filter. It's now saved and it's available right here. Now watch what happens if I go back out to the primary members grid and come back in. There's a members. So in fact, I had another one where I did exactly the same thing, but search members on multiple zip codes. When I run it, it'll go with whatever I had in the default, but here's the really neat thing. I can go in and simply modify these values to be whatever it is I'm searching for now in order to render new content. One of those new ones was the 17233. I'm going to go with dash 8760. I think that's one of the values in one of the records, and you see that coming open here. So in this lesson, we've looked at how grids work in the Union Fusion platform, how to do the inline filtering, how to do the advanced filtering. I've talked about how the reporting works. We haven't done anything with report creation, but I'll do that in some subsequent demonstrations that I give. I wanted to make sure you all had an opportunity to see how the content is filtered and managed here in the members grid. And the last thing I'm going to say about it is, while I have focused on the members grid, everything that I just said about the grid and its use applies to every grid in the system. It doesn't matter the nature of the data class. So if I go up here to contacts and I'm looking at contact groups, and I've got a list of contact groups that I'm showing here, the grid still behaves exactly the same as the other grid we were just looking at. If we're looking at companies, it's identical. I've got inline filters. I've got advanced filters. If I have done some filters down here, let's go down to Canton. So here I found a record. Any report output that I would do here in this particular grid is always going to reflect exactly what I've got in the grid in exactly the same order. And by the way, these principles that apply to the grids I'm not just talking about people and companies. This applies to anything in the system. So if we're looking at education and students, this grid behaves exactly the same. If we're looking at classes, this grid responds exactly the same. Again, and just to finish off, the biggest thing you'll be doing in our platform is just learning how to focus where the content is stored. Once you've learned how the grid behaves and acts, truly you're an expert on the use of the grid within our platform. You just have to learn how to use it with different data classes. This concludes this Lessons on Grid. Thanks for participating. We'll have more content published in other screencasts up and coming.